Good morning, and welcome to the Daily Geeky Pastimes podcast, episode number 35, with the gaming news from the 23rd of May, 2023. Thank you to everyone that's come and listening to this live on YouTube. We record it live every 9 a.m. every weekday morning, and then it's available on all of the normal podcast services after that. So we've got quite a lot of news to talk about today, and I think we're going to get straight into it. So the first story is kind of a continuation of something from yesterday. There's been a lot more discussion about the Call of Duty fan clients and servers getting shut down. So as far as I understand it, and someone in chat I'm sure can correct me if I'm wrong about this, there's a group of kind of fan clients for Call of Duty that have been given a cease and desist. They're called like the X ones or something like that. And I think Plutonium hasn't been shut down, as far as I know. So Plutonium is a thing that I know lots of people use to play the old Call of Duty Zombies because there's lots of problems with Black Ops 3, the sort of official version of it. So there's another version of it that lets you play them, as well as a bunch of other maps, like people ported other maps into it. That, I'm pretty sure, is what's happening. And lots of people have been sort of questioning, why would Activision suddenly decide to shut down all of these fan-made clients, fan servers, now? Like, they've been running for years, they've been running for a long while, they're quite sort of, projects that have built up a community. Why would they suddenly turn around and send cease and desists? I put out a tweet yesterday that did all right, that was just saying, we've seen this before. Like, we've seen almost exactly this news cycle before, with the same company, which might give us some kind of clue as to what's happening. Now, I don't have any insider information. I don't have any I haven't heard anything. I haven't spoken to anyone. I don't know anything. So this isn't even a rumor. This is more just me speculating, but it kind of makes sense. We saw this before with World of Warcraft. So with World of Warcraft, there used to be a bunch of private servers that ran the sort of classic version of World of Warcraft. So lots of people didn't really like stuff that the expansions had added. Especially after Legion, I think people didn't really like those expansions very much. And so lots of people decided, hey, we want to play World of Warcraft like it was at the beginning, when hunters needed to craft ammo and when the raids needed 40 people all working together, stuff like that. And so they set up private servers. I mean, it sounded like a super clever thing that they managed to do. They basically set up servers running a version of the game that was similar to the one that was running originally. And there was quite a lot of these, but there was one called like Nostalrius, which I think was by far the biggest one. That was kind of the popular one. And one that, like, these ran for years and years and years. And it was just kind of a, not a permitted thing, but something that was always kind of just ignored. Everyone was like, oh yeah, you can play like the official Call of Duty client if you want updates and all of the new stuff and support and everything. Or if you're willing to like get a bit in the weeds with trying out other stuff, you can run some of these fan ones. And they were always, not illegal, but they were always like wrong in some way because you could play them for free. Like, you didn't need to buy the game, you didn't need to buy a subscription, any of that stuff. You could just play it for free. So obviously, a big company that made a game and is trying to sell that game, you'd think would probably be annoyed that someone else was making a game, making the same version of the game, not the same version, but like a past version of the game, available for free. You can see why they wouldn't like that. But they kind of just let it slide. They just kind of let it happen for a while. Probably it was good for the overall World of Warcraft community and stuff. And then one day, suddenly, a load of news came out saying like, hey, Blizzard is shutting down all of this. And bear in mind, Activision Blizzard, same kind of parent company. So Blizzard said, hey, they were sending cease and desists to all of these private servers. And they all got shut down. Like, they all got shut down really quickly because, they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. There was no way to defend what they were doing. So it was just very much, they all got shut down very quickly. And everyone was like, this is terrible. And people were like, Blizzard just cares about money. They just don't want people playing the old games. They want everyone going to the new games. All of this stuff. And then, like, I would say a few weeks, maybe a month later, they announced World of Warcraft Classic. And it's like, oh, this is why they shut down the fan ones, because they were basically creating a product that would have served the exact same audience. And, they wanted people to pay for that rather than rather than getting it for free, basically, of someone else. So it suddenly made a lot of sense as to why they suddenly changed their mind and decided to shut stuff down. And now a similar thing's happening with Call of Duty, with Activision, the other side of Activision Blizzard, where these private servers that have kind of kept the old games alive, that haven't been supported for a long while, their old clients don't work very well, lots of cheaters, hackers, bad stuff going on over there. There's fan services that have kept these going. Activision's turned a blind eye to it for years at this point. You know, obviously the developers know about this, but they've kind of, in the legal teams, but they've ignored it for a while. Then all of a sudden, something's changed, and they've decided, hey, actually, we're going to shut these down. Now, I've seen some people coming up with kind of theories that it's to do with Microsoft's acquisition, and Microsoft have said that they want this to be done before they buy them. I don't think that's true. I think if this was part of like the preparation for acquisition, this would have happened a long while ago. I think this would have happened months and months and months ago. The fact it's happening now makes me think that this year we're going to get some sort of Call of Duty classic. Whether that is one game with a bunch of old maps and a bunch of old, you know, modes and weapons and stuff like that, or whether it's actually re-releasing the old games, like, you know, doing something like maybe the Master Chief Collection, like Halo did, where you have one big client, but then you can load up all of the old games within that client. I think we're going to get something like that, and I think that's why they're shutting down all of these old things, because they want people to pay for it, because, you know, they own it. Like, they're the ones that worked on it, which I think is fair enough. Like, to me, I don't think this is some... I've seen a lot of talk on the internet about this whole story where people seem to think that it was something super evil. Like, Activision are really in the wrong for shutting down these projects. And it's like, I don't think they are. Like, I don't think that's true. And, you know, people always say, like, oh, well, you know, the mod developers, the people who are making these clients were doing it for free. Do you think that's true? Like, do you think they weren't getting any money from this at all? Like, I imagine they're probably getting donations and things like that from the people that use the servers. You know, whether it's a Patreon, whether it's their Twitch channel or whatever. I imagine they are getting a lot of attention and, you know, indirectly maybe money from running these things. And so, you know, it is something that they're just not allowed to do. You can't just look at something that someone else made, even if it was a long time ago, and just be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna make that." But you know, it's already been done. There's a weird, you know, and it's not, when we say a long time ago, it's not like when people use old books and stuff that are in the creative, what do they call it? You know, the commons. What do they call it? Creative Commons? I don't know what they call it. When the license goes up, like Winnie the Pooh just did. Whatever that is called. It's not like that, because these games didn't come out like 100 years ago. These games came out like 10 years ago, so it's like a lot more recent. But yeah, I kind of, like, my thinking is that this is leaning into they're doing something with those properties, and that's why they've suddenly changed their mind. The thing that's interesting to me is that Plutonium hasn't been shut down, as far as I know. I don't think they've said anything about Plutonium, and I don't know why. You know, if this was kind of what I'm saying is, then why wouldn't they just shut down all of them? Like, why wouldn't they just be like, hey, we're going to shut down every single thing? And as far as I can tell, they haven't. They even, if you look at the Plutonium project, sorry, Plutonium, for anyone who doesn't know, is another kind of, I don't know what the word is, another one of these fan projects to keep things running. And you can play Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3, World at War. And like I said, I know a lot of people use this for zombies. A lot of people use Plutonium in order to play the zombies maps that you can't play very easily now, especially on PC. And so, like, they run it through that, which, you know, like, that's a cool thing that people can still play those. And so what would be different about the X Labs project, which was the one that got shut down, to Plutonium? And there's a few things for that. Again, we're just speculating here, like, we're just kind of making stuff up at this point. But potentially, and you know, here's me throwing out a few ideas. I could imagine something where Activision contacted these people and had some sort of deal, some sort of discussion in an NDA, and the Plutonium people agreed to it and the X Labs people didn't. that there was something that they're not allowed to talk about. If that happened, I would imagine it will leak, because I can't imagine the sort of people that are running these servers are likely to care as much about an NDA or anything like that. Or there's something particular about what the XLabs projects are doing, like what games they were covering, maybe. That's possible. Because I saw with the XLabs thing, they said that they're shutting down the XLabs things and they're shutting down Black Ops 3. I do wonder whether there's something going on there, whether there's something that XLabs has properly shut down, even the website's gone. I can't work out what it was. I'd never heard of it, to be honest. For full transparency, I'd never heard of XLabs before, like, this week. But yeah, so maybe there must be something different about plutonium. Unless it's just something, plutonium, maybe it's based in another country and it's taking a bit longer for, like, the legal system to go through or something like that, and maybe plutonium will get shut down. Who knows? But I think, like, it would be more telling if XLabs got shut down and plutonium didn't. Then people could maybe dig into, okay, what's actually different about these two projects? Like, what's the thing that gets them separated? Was there one particular game that was running on XLabs that wasn't running on plutonium? That would maybe be more interesting. It is a weird thing, like, looking at how the internet's blown up a bit over this. I was just saw this morning, I saw X Defiant is trending on Twitter. And I was like, that's weird. Have they announced, like, a new beta or a release date or something like that? And it's not. It's just loads and loads of people who play Call of Duty, who have Call of Duty accounts, being like, Activision are so bad, like, I can't wait to jump over to X Defiant. Like, Ubisoft should just release X Defiant now, because then we can all jump over there and play that. And so on and so forth, the normal kind of stuff. Which is funny to me, just like, it entertains me no end when I see so much negativity about Ubisoft usually. And now there's all of these people being like, Activision is so bad, we're going to go over to Ubisoft. They care about the gamers. And it's like, well, you should speak to some of the people who play Rainbow Six Siege and Ghost Recon and see what they say about that. Because I'm not sure that's... I think it's a grass is always greener situation there. It's also, people always talk about this with games where they say they're going to, people are like, I hate this game that I play all day, every day, and talk about all day, every day. And it's like, I'm going to jump over to their competitor because they're not making the changes I want. And then they go over to their competitor and they realize the competitor isn't as good. And they're like, oh, no. And then they complain there for like a week or so. And then they'll normally, the way this normally will work is, say that you've got a Call of Duty creator that's saying they're going to jump over to X Defiant as like their main game. They will hop over to X Defiant on launch night and they will be grinding it, and they will put out a video saying how amazing it is. They'll put out a bunch of tweets saying it's incredible. They'll be streaming it, being like, oh my God, this is our new game. They might even have like stream overlays and everything set up for that new game. And then it'll be like 2 days after launch, their views will start dropping a little bit because, like, Call of Duty will release something new or anything like that. And they'll still be streaming it, but they'll be a bit quieter about it. And then a couple of days after that, they'll be like, oh, this game would be really good if, and then they'll start falling back into the same patterns they did with Call of Duty, where they're telling the developers what to do, and they're saying that, they want the game to be like this, 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 and this. And then the next week, they'll be back on Call of Duty. Like, they'll be playing Call of Duty again. And it'll be as if it never happened. And this happens all over the place. Like, it happens tons. I've done stuff like this before. It's not a cynical thing. It's a natural human thing. I think people just get, again, grass is always greener. People get really hyped about something else. X Defiant, I genuinely think, is a fun game. I'm seeing it as it will be an additional game to play. It'll be something, I'll still probably play Call of Duty, but I'll play some X Defiant too. And I'm looking forward to that. But the idea where people seem to think that Ubisoft are just going to solve all of the problems that people have with Call of Duty, it just isn't true. That's not reality. That's not how that's going to work. You can see, if you look at the X Defiant thing trending, there's loads of people being like, Activision haven't ever got rid of skill-based matchmaking, so we're going to go to X Defiant because they've said there is no skill-based matchmaking. And I'm sure those people will have an amazing time when they're putting games where it's a complete, like, blowout either side. We played a handful of games of X Defiant on a beta where there was me and Flynn and Jaff and one of Jaff's friends were playing. And, this is like I think it's a, 6v6 game, I think. And there was only 4 of us. And we had some games where we didn't even have the other 2 people. And we still, because we were, you know, communicating, and obviously Jaff's really good, we absolutely decimated every team. We didn't lose a single match that whole night when there was just 4 of us playing together. And it wasn't even like the games weren't even close for the most part. The games where we were 2 people down were a bit closer, but the games where we had a 6-person team, it wasn't even close. It was just game after game after game of us absolutely destroying the enemies. And it wasn't that much fun doing that. Like, you know, it's fun trying out a new game and everything, but it made the games kind of boring. It was just like we were just winning every single game. And I doubt it was much fun for the enemies either, where they were constantly doing really badly. They were constantly getting destroyed. People were quitting their teams really, like, regularly. It just kind of sucked. And it's like, that's what skill-based matchmaking tries to avoid, these kind of ridiculous one-sided fights. And, you know, you play Call of Duty multiplayer now. You play Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer. I would say, personally, in my experience, outside of ranked, it's pretty rare you have a completely one-sided match. It happens, like it does happen. I would say maybe like 10% of the games I play, 20% of the games I play have some like inherent, like, there's a big problem with the balance. But most of the games I play in Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer end up being pretty close, that like either team could win until right near the end. And that's because the skill-based matchmaking is working fairly well. You know, that's because it is doing its job of making the games feel close, so you're not just constantly destroying it. And, you know, I've played with really good people, and admittedly in the Call of Duty beta, we did, you know, we went on a run of search and destroy, of destroying every other team and, like, beating everybody else. But that was when I was playing with, like, Lackey and Broken and, you know, really, really good players like that. I think, like, you know, XDefine, if they don't put in any skill-based matchmaking, is going to have a problem that the games are going to feel boring. No matter how good the actual core game is, if it's that unbalanced, like, people don't want to hop into a lobby and then have someone up against them who's insanely good. And people don't want to, people who are insanely good, I think will get bored of always being the best people. So I think there's a lot of this stuff in XDefine that sounds good, because if you've been living on this narrative for like 3-4 years now of Call of Duty's trash because skill-based matchmaking and whatever else people have problems with Call of Duty, you know, devs don't listen to the community, blah, blah, blah. And then you have someone from XDefiant, one of the developers, being like, well, we don't have skill-based matchmaking and we're going to listen to everybody. That sounds really, really good. That sounds really fun. But then you'll go over there and play it and be like, no, actually, you know what? Call of Duty, they actually make pretty good games. Like, there's a lot of stuff about Call of Duty that's really, really good. And people come back to it. And there's actually been a really good example of this very recently. So moving on to the second news story, which for some reason I put in last in the order, but it makes way more sense here. Super People, the Battle Royale, actually Super People 2 is shutting down in August. So this is a Battle Royale game that was being made. I've actually got a bunch of Super People stuff. I've got a t-shirt. I've got my desk mat thing is Super People. They sent me a bunch of stuff for being a Super People partner. This was a Battle Royale game that was made, and again, lots of promises of how it's going to be better than Warzone in various ways. It was closer to PUBG, really. It's more like the PUBG style of things. But they launched, I think it's a Korean developer. They launched a game as Super People. It was like kind of PUBG, but with crazy superpowers and stuff like that. Crafting instead of just looting, that was kind of interesting. And then when they first opened it up, they were like, yeah, we're going to be like, you know, we're not going to be for casuals. We're going to be super competitive. We're going to have tournaments every day where people win real money and anyone could try and qualify for these tournaments and then get into them. And yeah, people played it. Lots of people jumped over to it. I definitely played a bit. I sort of hopped in there for like maybe 3 days. I gave it a good try. And then for me, I was like, this isn't for me. It is like very much super competitive, high skill gap. You know, the aiming is quite difficult. You have to be like super precise to kill people. Movement was insane because of all the teleporting and jumping and stuff like that. It just wasn't for me, you know, way too high skill gap for me. And yeah, and then weirdly enough, once they stopped offering people money to play to win these tournaments, suddenly it just stopped. People stopped playing it. And if you look at the Steam charts for it, it was just like a nosedive until it went down to the point where now I think there's like 100 people playing it or something like that. There's probably a few more now because, you know, it's just announced it's been cancelled, so it's in the news again. So yeah, Super People 2 currently has 247 players, down from a peak of 47,000. So I suppose it never did spectacularly well. I'm not sure if that counts as different from, Yeah, I think that does count as different maybe from Super People 1. But yeah, 247 players. It just nosedived. It's like, was ridiculous how quickly it dropped players. Um, and you know, to me at least, if I was going to give my expert analysis on what happened to Super People, they went after the competitive battle royale market and realized it didn't exist. That to me is a big problem. And I know, like, since then they've had problems where people have said, you know, there's loads of hacking in it. There's lots of problems with low population servers. There's lots of problems with out of region players and high ping and stuff like that. I think, to me, all of those things are symptoms of just there's not enough people playing. There's not enough investment, so they can't afford to keep up against the hacking. They can't afford to keep servers running in every region. There's not enough people playing in every region to make that viable. And I think it's exactly the same problem Hyperscape had, that they made a kind of cool game and then they went after this market that if you believed the sort of Warzone online community in terms of the people who talk about it on Twitter and Reddit, you would believe that there is this massive market for a restrained, high skill gap battle royale game. Like, that's what the people are really clamoring for. And it doesn't exist. And whenever people have tried it, the game has just failed. Like, the game has just flopped hard because there just aren't that many people who want that, I don't think. There's a handful of content creators who really want it. And then there's lots of people who kind of, they want to seem all tough and hard and like, yeah, I'm a hardcore battle royale player. I want to play something really, like, really rock solid, like really hard. And like, when they actually get faced with the reality of it, they're like, oh, this is really difficult. You know, Bloodhunt was another one. Really high skill gap in Bloodhunt. Died horrifically. It just doesn't work. It just is a thing that doesn't happen. PUBG is about as close as you can get to it, I think. And even PUBG, you know, a lot of people don't like. It still does really well, obviously. PUBG, like, people play loads of it. It's got 171,000 people playing it just on PC right now. But it's, yeah, it's definitely, I think, history has shown, the history of the last 5 years, history is a grand term for it, has shown that people want an accessible experience. People want something that they can play with their friends, that they can play even if they don't play every day, even if they don't have the best setup, even if they don't have, like, even if they don't care about practicing or watching videos or tutorials on how to do things. People just want a game they can hop in with and be a bit silly in and have some fun with. That's much more successful than having a game that is, like, intensely competitive for something like a battle royale. I think, you know, and like, I've talked about this a few times, so I'm going to kind of shut up about it soon, is that, like, the problem with having a super competitive battle royale is that if you've got a really competitive game like Counter-Strike, you've got, this is embarrassing, I don't actually know how many people are on a team in Counter-Strike, like 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, I don't know, something like that. If you've got a game like that, that's hyper competitive, and you've got 4, 5, 6 players on one team, 4, 5, 6 players on the other team, you're only trying to beat those other 6 players. You've got to try and be better than those other 6 players. And you've got a team that's equal in size to them, so you might have, you know, just with, like, the law of averages, you might have people on your team that are better than the people on the other team. And so you've got a fairly decent chance, even if you're not playing your A game, even if you're not doing your best, you've got a decent chance of beating the other team, you know, maybe half of the time, maybe more. And that means that you've got a lot of success. You know, if you're playing Counter-Strike, or you're playing Street Fighter, or you're playing Dota, or League of Legends, or whatever it is, like these really, really competitive games, you know, high skill gap, competitive games, Valorant, if you're playing any of those, then you've got a decent chance of winning games fairly regularly, haven't you? Like, that just makes sense that you would. If you've got a game where you've got 150 players and you're going in a lobby where you're going in with a team of maybe up to 4, but most likely 3 for a lot of these games. So you've got 3 people and there's like 100 people in the server, 150 people in the server. You've now got like 97 people, 147 people of, if any of those people are much, much better than you, they're going to be the ones to win that lobby. You're not going to win that. Like, they're going to be the ones to beat you. If it's hyper competitive and if it's super fair and there's no RNG or anything, if you get in that lobby and you are not the best team, you should lose. And that means you're going to be losing nearly all the time. You know, if you are, say it's a 100-player game, and you are 3 players in that 100 players, or 99 players, I guess, or 102 players, then you're going to be winning, you know, you would assume you'd be winning 3% of the time. Like, that seems like that's pretty bad odds. Like, that seems like you're going to be winning, you know, 1 in every 33 games. A lot of people aren't going to have much fun doing that. A lot of people aren't going to enjoy that. No matter how big and tough and hard they are, they're probably going to be a bit annoyed about losing all of those. And if all things are fair and if there's no RNG and stuff, that's what's going to happen. And obviously, like, that's why I've always said with Battle Royale games, you want there to be a lot of RNG. You want things to be mixed up. You want everyone to kind of have a chance. And, you know, things like ground loot help with that. Things like high recoil guns help with that. Just lowering the skill gap a bit helps a bunch of that, making it so everyone, when they go into a game, believes they've got a decent chance of winning. Everyone thinks like, yeah, I could win this. Like, I could maybe win this. And they should win, you know, some, not 1 in every 33 games. And I think like that's the problem when these Battle Royale games start trying to push towards being more competitive, is they get more and more to the point where the best team in any given lobby wins. And that's unlikely to be you. It's like that whole thing, you know, where people, some mathematicians did the whole thing about how come when you go into a line at the supermarket and, you know, there's lots of lines for cash registers, you're nearly always in one of the slowest ones. And it's like, oh, it's just a numbers thing. It's not like you're doing anything wrong picking them. It's just that you're in like 1 out of 10 lines. The chance of you being in the fastest one is 10%. The chance of someone else being the fastest one is 90%. And you're going to notice the fastest ones. You're not really going to notice the ones that are even slower than yours. So it's like, you're always going to feel like you're losing when you go to the shops, or nearly always. You're nearly always going to feel like you're in the slowest one, that you've picked the slowest line. And then you don't even think about it when you are in the fastest line. It doesn't even occur to you because you're just moving through. You know, I think that similar thing happens with Battle Royale, that the people who are winning those games don't think about it. The people who are winning those games don't think about the problem for everyone else in the lobby. They don't think about the experience of everyone else. So if you're a content creator who's like literally you're doing it as your full-time job, just playing this game pretty much, you know, 6 hours a day, you're going in and you're winning loads more games than the average because often you are the best player in that lobby or you're in the best team in that lobby. You won't notice those problems. You won't like be aware of what it's like for everybody else. And then you get people saying like stupid stuff like, well, these people just need to get good. Like, life shouldn't be about participation awards. People need to learn skills. People need to practice. And it's like, it's a bloody video game. And not many people can play a video game for 6 hours a day and like watch loads of videos about it and do that. And lots of people don't want to do that, which is a perfectly healthy way to act. You know, normal people don't want to play a game 6 hours a day, every day, and try to get better at it or anything like that. They just want to play and have some fun. So yeah, so my point with all of this essentially is that games like Super People are failing, they're shutting down, and I think it's kind of another sign that competitive Battle Royale games don't work. That competitive Battle Royale games, I just don't think can sustain an audience. I don't think they can sustain a really sort of like a solid experience. And you know, it's like the big thing that would count against what I'm saying is PUBG. Essentially, lots of people could look at PUBG and be like, well, there's loads of PUBG tournaments. PUBG's doing really well. Do you think out of the 171,000 people who are playing PUBG on PC right now, how many of them do you think have ever been in a tournament? How many of them do you think have ever even considered entering a tournament? How many of them do you think even know that tournaments exist for PUBG? I reckon a lot of them just play it and mess around with their friends. You know, that's why PUBG does well on mobile. Because, you know, the people who are playing on mobile aren't these like super hyper competitive sweats. They're just people who are playing the game because it's fun. And, you know, it was one of the first Battle Royale games, one of the first big ones. And a lot of people played it and just never moved on. They just kept on playing it because it's, you know, it's constantly releasing new stuff. You can get used to it. Your friends all have it. It's like free to play now. They enjoy it. I mean, bear in mind, like the peak of it, when it used to have its peak was like 3.2 million players, and now it's down to 188,000. That does seem like, you know, it's not been doing as well, but it's still doing much, much better than most other games. So that is my TED talk on why competitive Battle Royale games are going to fail. And that brings me neatly, I'm getting much better at segues, that brings me neatly onto my next topic, which is the World Series of Warzone. So the next news story is that World Series of Warzone has been rescheduled to sometime in June. It's like near the beginning of June. I don't know, June 10th, was it? Something like that. But it's happening. They are doing it. And I think that's kind of a it's a good thing for the people who are involved. I know Jaff and Lackey are getting involved in that. They're a part of it. They got invited, which is super exciting for them. So good for them. And I'm sure like people who are into this, you know, World Series of Warzone is a great thing. I do think, however, though, I was a little bit surprised over the last few weeks where World Series of Warzone's been kind of ramping up before everything bad happened. Well, actually, including when everything bad happened. That no one seems to care about it. Like, I haven't seen mainstream news sites picking up on the stories about what happened in World Series of Warzone, you know, that it was running at all, that it was, you know, so the first one running for Warzone 2, that it got cancelled because the servers were crashing so much, and now that it's been rescheduled, I haven't seen that on mainstream news at all. Like, not mainstream news, but, you know, mainstream gaming news. You know, I'm not seeing it on IGN, on Eurogamer, places at Polygon, places like that. They're not really talking about, and they do talk about, you know, specific things. You see a lot of stuff where it's like talking about a new season in Apex or talking about a new season in Call of Duty. You do see them do news stories about ongoing games, but World Series of Warzone just doesn't seem to be making like the slightest ripple in a sort of broader sense. And it's one of those things where it's like, how many people do really care about it? I'd be really interested to know kind of, say when they do the Twitch stream for it, I assume they're doing it on Twitch this time because their deal with YouTube ended, didn't it? Say they're doing a Twitch stream. If they do something which they normally do with like CDL things and things like that, normally they end up doing like Twitch drops. As soon as you do Twitch drops, you now can't trust the viewing figures for anything. Like any game that's done Twitch drops, it's very hard to trust their viewing figures because loads of people would just leave Twitch signed into a streamer to get the drops. You know, I see that. If I stream something with Twitch drops, I'll have like 500 people watching me. If I stream something without Twitch drops, I'll have like 20 people watching me. It's like, it just inflates the figures. So taking away from the Twitch drops, I'd be really interested to know like how many people watch World Series of Warzone? How many people watch the you know, how many people go back and watch the VODs on the YouTube channels and things like that? And obviously it's super difficult because people might not be watching the official World Series of Warzone thing. They'll watch their favorite streamer, and like if your favorite streamer is in it, of course you're going to watch it. Like I'll be watching Lackey and Jaff to see how they get on. Like why wouldn't I do that? Of course I'll be watching them. So it's like obviously really good for those creators, but in terms of the wider kind of impact of it, I just don't think it's there. I just don't think it's something that is moving the needle at all on kind of overall interest in Warzone, which is surely the point. Like, surely the point of something like World Series of Warzone is to try and get more people interested in it, like to try and get more people excited about it. And I don't see that happening. Like none of my friends who kind of I play Warzone with out but aren't, you know, super into Twitter and Reddit and stuff like that, none of them ever mention it. Like I don't know if they know what it is at all. Like I said, I don't see anything about it outside of the normal Call of Duty circles. And even within the Call of Duty circles, a lot of the creators I follow just aren't connected to it at all. Like they aren't interested, either because they've moved on to DMZ stuff, or, you know, they already look at CDL stuff, but they're not really interested in Warzone. It just seems like it's become such a niche thing, but a niche thing that's very expensive. And then you're seeing people talking about, like, you know, demanding changes to the game based on what World Series of Warzone needs. And it's like, I really don't think they should. I don't think they should bother spending the energy on it. I just don't think it's something that matters enough for them to consider what the game's like. Now, obviously, if it's something that benefits Warzone Ranked, then, you know, that's probably a win for everybody. If like Warzone Ranked and World Series of Warzone, you know, like I think they do that with CDL, don't they? Where there's like the Call of Duty multiplayer ranked stuff sort of ties in with CDL. Then I could see some fun of that. But the problem is that with CDL, I always find it ridiculous. And again, I'm someone who's not into this at all. I'm not like into the esports FPS scene in any way, really. I always find all the gentlemen's agreements and stuff like that really silly. Like, you know, it's different when you have something like there's one particular thing that's kind of broken at a certain time. You know, like, oh, this particular build of this gun is absolutely broken. Everyone would be using it for everything, so let's like not agree not to use it. Like, kind of fair enough. But then when that sort of the gentleman's agreement start covering basically 3/4 of the game, it seems like you're getting to the other problem that everyone is basically using whatever's left because everything else has been taken out. Like the game itself has been reduced down to something that is like very finite. It's the same reason, you know, I'm not a big fan of watching Smash Brothers tournaments because they play on the most basic levels. They don't have any of the items on or anything. All of the stuff that I kind of find fun in Smash Brothers, they pare that down for the competitive scene. And it's like, no, I just kind of like the fun stuff. I just kind of like the entertaining, like, you know, random stuff is a bit more fun. I would be, you know, up for seeing a World Series of Warzone where crazy things can happen. And I know obviously the people involved don't want that because they want it to be fair and reliable because they've got money on the line and stuff like that. But I'd like it if crazy stuff happened. I'd like it if in World Series of Warzone finals, the final circle was in the water and just someone happened to have a piston cleared up. That'd be entertaining. That'd be dramatic. That'd be much more fun for me as a spectator. And surely the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of spectators are more valuable than the, you know, 200 people that are playing it, 150 people that are playing it, maybe. But I don't know. I think the whole situation of Call of Duty moving at all towards competitive stuff has been a mistake in general. I think CDL's been a mistake. I think World Series of Warzone's been a mistake. Just not even like the fact that they are doing it, but the way they've gone about it. I think this competitive aspect of gaming, and particularly of Call of Duty, is just kind of moving it more and more into something where no one's going to be happy. Like, the more Call of Duty gets focused on the competitive side of it, the more that's going to turn off normal people from playing it, which makes the population smaller, which exacerbates all the problems with, like, matchmaking and connections and skill level. And then you've got a community of people that just can't be pleased. Like, you've got a group of people that just, you will never, ever make them happy. Like, ever. There's no way all of those people, like, you know, J God and Charlie Intel, all these people who are constantly, you know, when I don't follow Charlie Intel anymore on Twitter, but when I see people retweeting the stuff, it's always negative. It's always complaining about stuff. It's always laughing at how bad something is about the game. Like, I don't think there's ever going to be a time when that goes away. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when that gets turned around into something positive. I think it's just whatever, like, they'll keep moving the goalpost, but they'll say, like, oh, we need this, the game needs this, the game needs this. And they're not game developers, they're not game designers, they're just fans. And so they're just going to keep on saying stuff that they want. Their millions of followers will say the same thing. And they'll know, and like, whatever the game studios do, they'll never be happy. Because bear in mind, if you're not a game designer, if you're not a game developer, you're not going to be constrained in your imagination by the reality of the game, by the reality of, you know, technical limitations or resources or how much stuff would cost or how much time it takes, or maybe there's one part of the engine that's got some problems, but the person that actually created that part of the engine left the company 5 years ago and didn't leave any good documentation, and so people are still trying to sort of work out exactly how to tweak it without breaking everything else. All of those kind of things that happen within a sort of developer. If you're just someone like, you know, you're just a content creator who plays the game but doesn't have to make anything, like doesn't have to make any part of it, then you can just say whatever you want. You can just be like, well, obviously they need to do this. Like, obviously they need to fix the servers. Obviously they need to fix the time to kill. Obviously they need to change movement, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's so easy for those people to say that stuff with like no restraint, no kind of constraints at all. And then the developers look bad because they're like, they either say, oh, we can't do that, and then they look bad, or they say, yeah, we're working on that, and then they don't deliver, and then they look bad, or they just stay silent, and then they look bad because they're not communicating. Like, the developers can't win. The content creators get a ton of engagement. They make a bunch of money while they're being negative and hating on the game. And it's like an impossible situation. It's like, it's not something that can be fixed. And I think, like, you know, you look at games that are hyper successful like GTA Online. Does GTA Online have the same thing? Did I have people demanding balance in GTA Online? Did I have people demanding that they fix like the, you know, the way playlists work and stuff like that in it? Because that game has been a mess since launch. Like, it's just loads of it doesn't work, and it's still one of the biggest games of all time because it's super fun, and the people that play it, no one's taking it too seriously. Like, people aren't being super competitive about it. Like, they're not trying to set up big tournaments, they're not trying to put tons of money on the line to like win the thing. They're just having a laugh. Someone hops into a Grand Theft Auto race, and you know some weird physics stuff is going to happen. And it doesn't matter. It's just fun because it's part of the game. Same, you know, stuff like Mario Kart. People who are playing Mario Kart don't care. I saw the guy that made Smash Brothers, the designer of Smash Brothers, said yesterday in an interview that I saw yesterday at least, said something along lines of like, yeah, Smash Brothers doesn't really work well online. Like, it's just not something that can be done very well, very successfully. He just came out and said it because he's like, that's not how you're meant to be playing the game. You're meant to be playing the game on the sofa. And he actually said like something which I've brought up before, but he articulated it in a nice way where he was saying the ideal situation for Smash Brothers is that you're playing with your group of friends. And, you know, you can come up with your own rules. You can come up with your own way of playing. You can come up with your own meaning of, you know, what it means to win. And they give you all the tools to make the game kind of what you want in terms of rules and stuff like that. And he said, but when you go online, now you're up against people who just want to win, and you're up against a much bigger pool. So you're not likely to be the best person anymore. You're not likely to even be average anymore. And therefore, you're going to be like struggling, and you're going to have a bad time. And it was like, that's exactly it. It's like these games, I think, should be pushing more and more towards trying to be Mario Kart, trying to be Smash Brothers, trying to be GTA Online, trying to focus on, hey, what's the most fun thing for a lot of people? Rather than trying to go the other way and being like, we need to make this serious, we need to make this about competition and integrity and fairness. Because I just think that's something that is like unobtainable. It can't be achieved. I don't think it can ever work. And it's like, it's fine for there to be niche games like that. And that's something that, you know, a lot of games are fine being niche games. You know, you look at something like iRacing or Assetto Corsa, like these racing games are like super hardcore simulators. iRacing's probably the best example. They know with iRacing, they're never going to be like the most successful game in the world. They know they're never going to be like the top sellers. They're not going to get on the NPDs. They're not going to be making billions of dollars or anything like that. Because instead, they're just serving what they understand is a very niche audience. And they're serving them incredibly well. I mean, I know, I'm sure there's still lots of complaints within that. And it's like, you get the same thing with fighting games. So sometimes people bring out a fighting game that's super technical, you know, Guilty Gear Strive. You get a fighting game that's super technical, and it serves its very niche audience incredibly well. And they can like set their budgets accordingly. They can like decide, you know, exactly what that audience is looking for and build something for them, knowing that only a few thousand people are going to be playing their game, and that's fine. But when you've got something as big as Call of Duty that's trying to appeal to people, I feel like, to me at least, and, you know, from my perspective, all of the pushing towards competitive play, all of the pushing towards making the game a more competitive game or making the game better for competitive players is making it actively worse for the normal people. Like, it's making it less fun for normal people. And it's, you know, not just even in the game design, it comes across in the marketing, it comes across in like their social media presence. And it's reflected within the community. You know, it's reflected in the community that, well, you know, that a lot of those big names within the community, they'll be super excited about things that sound super competitive and raise the skill gap, and they'll be super negative about anything that lowers the skill gap and sounds like it's better for normal people. Like, you know, that's a thing, because again, a lot of these people are at the top of that bell curve. A lot of these people are the best players. So that stuff kind of serves them in the short term. It gives them a chance to make amazing content. It gives them a chance to win tournaments. It gives them a better chance of just kind of making content where they're winning a lot. Even though whenever that's happening, it's kind of at the expense of the other 97% of every lobby that they're in, who are now having less fun and are more likely to quit, and then the population will shrink, and then everyone will be like, oh, it's a dead game. They need to fix skill-based matchmaking. And like, oh, so annoying. Anyway, that was a long rant, wasn't it? I did literally, this is like the third news story, and I thought, oh, you know, I don't know, like, going I've got a couple of things towards the end that I need to save for the end because I'm going to talk about them for a long time. And now we've got 16 minutes left. Oh my God. Anyway, I'm going to go through some of the chat now because otherwise it's not going to be relevant. I imagine people have thoughts on all of that. So when I was talking about the collection, about the idea of old Call of Duty games coming back, Affa said about, please let it be better than the Master Chief Collection was at launch. I mean, yeah, the Master Chief Collection did get fixed surprisingly quickly, but there were a lot of problems with it at launch, for sure. I would say Call of Duty games are normally pretty good at launch. Like, the servers tend to work pretty well. All the game modes tend to work. You know, there's always like a couple of things, you know, like the friends list bugs and stuff like that, leaderboards bugs and stuff. But in terms of actually just playing the game, I can't remember the last time a Call of Duty game came out and I couldn't play it at launch. I can't remember the last, well, it was Master Chief Collection. You literally couldn't play it for a while. Stephen Owen said any company would tell others to stop releasing a game they own. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's one of those things where I find it bizarre that people have been painting Activision as like an evil company for shutting down these things. And it's like, it's kind of amazing they let them keep on going as long as they did, to be honest. It's bizarre. House UK said, if you play Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer now, nobody's trying to win. Everyone's grinding camos in every game I play. Yeah, if you play ranked, you see people trying to win. But if you play normal thing, it's everyone's using like rocket launchers and shields and knives and pistols and stuff and sniper rifles on shipment just to try and get all of their camos done. I mean, that's been a thing as long as Call of Duty's had grindable camos. That's been a constant thing. That's kind of what multiplayer devolved into, and it's just kind of random and it's a bit silly. I kind of like it that you've got loads of people using crazy weapons, so if you do want to, you know, just put a submachine gun on and go for it and try and win, you can do very well, very easily, because everyone else is doing something crazy. I think it's fine. Like, personally, it doesn't bother me too much. It is annoying when, if you wanted to play domination, you basically can't because no one else is going to be trying to do the objective with you. Or if you do go for the objective, you'll probably win it quite easily. But I suppose that's what ranked is for. Mark Kidsley said, does make me laugh how people are against skill-based matchmaking but love ranked. Yeah, I mean, lots of those people would argue that they want the choice. They want to be able to play like normal modes when they just want to relax and then play ranked when they want to try really hard, which I think there's some sense in that. I definitely think like that's a sensible way to approach it. That's generally fine. I think ranked becomes like the default mode and then unranked becomes like the weird Wild West where the games don't make any sense, which is fine. Affa said, I haven't played COD since the Modern Warfare 2 beta, but there were lots of cheaters towards the end of Cold War just before Ricochet launched. In multiplayer, I don't know if I've ever seen a cheater. In Warzone 2, I would say I've maybe seen 3 or 4 cheaters in all the time I've played. I haven't seen a lot, but you know, I'm not in those super high lobbies where I'm sure a lot of the cheaters get up to very, very quickly. Mark Kidsley said, I'd love a ground loot Warzone mode. No build Fortnite saved that game for you. Yeah, same. I'd love it if Warzone did that. Although Warzone, they seem very reluctant to have too many playlists. I think, you know, the matchmaking times for ranked are already pretty long. I think they're probably reluctant to have too many extra modes. I would love a no loadouts mode. I'd be happy if they did like no loadouts and maybe even got rid of, you know, perks and stuff like that altogether. I think I would like that. Affa said, I'm not sure a brand new Battle Royale that isn't attached to a major IP stands a chance, competitive or not. It's difficult. It's definitely difficult. Like, it's a very saturated market. People are, you know, have spent a lot of money buying their skins and stuff like that, building up their levels in Apex or in Fortnite or in PUBG or in Warzone. It's hard to see how someone would come in and do something different in that space. That would still be a Battle Royale. I think Battlefield still has a chance. I think if Battlefield, they did some of the best stuff from Firestorm, I think that has the name that they could do it. But yeah, if not, I know lots of people were super excited about the idea of like a Star Wars Battle Royale or a Halo Battle Royale. And I was at first, but then the more I think about it, I'm not sure if they would work very well as Battle Royale games, just like the way the game is. I can't see it personally. Although I did have a good idea for Halo Battle Royale ages ago of like, what if you had Halo Battle Royale and like you weren't playing as Spartans, but you were playing as like ODSTs. So you're dropping in the drop pods, and then it makes a bit more sense that you're scavenging and having to find armor and stuff like that. And then maybe you'd have like, you know, like the equivalent of getting like a Juggernaut armor or something. You could have some crazy game modes where someone drops in as like an elite or a Spartan, and then you know, the Arbiter or a Spartan, and then everyone else is against that like person. That could be kind of fun. But I think it'd be quite hard to make it work. Same with Star Wars, because like the idea of someone looting in Star Wars seems odd to me. That seems like a strange thing because all the guns seem the same, and you don't, armor doesn't seem to matter. It just seems like it would be a bit weird. Again, I had an idea of how they could do it. Of you could do a Star Wars one where instead of looting items, you change characters. So you find someone who will help you. You have loads of NPCs and stuff, and like maybe you go into town and you find a bounty hunter, and it's like if you beat the bounty hunter as a bot, then you now get to play as the bounty hunter. Or you beat a Jedi, you now get to play as the Jedi. And so when it gets to the final circle, you've got like a bunch of like Jedi and bounty hunters fighting. That'd be cool. But a bit weird. CSCX said, Pal said the only reason people watch the COD streams is for drops. Affas said, do Polygon talk about the Dota International? I assume that they do, Affas. I don't always read Polygon. I know Eurogamer's talks about the Dota International a lot. I mean, the fact that I know a lot about the Dota International is saying something, because I don't play Dota. So it must, like, they must get into the sort of, like, mainstream gaming news a lot more, the Dota international thing. Rather than, is it the Invitational or the International? I can't remember what it's actually called. But like I wonder how many Dota players know about World Servers of Warzone compared to how many Warzone players know about the Dota International. I mean, Dota International also has had like documentaries made about it and stuff. It's like a big deal. CS6X UK said, only interested because Tactical Brit, Jaff and Benny are in World Servers of Warzone. Yeah, exactly. Like that's my interest in World Servers of Warzone, is people who I know are in it. So I will watch them. Like that's it. UK Haim said, I pitched a full deck to Boom TV Activision and outlined a full Warzone league which had separate leagues for separate time zones and countries, i.e. Europe, North America, etc. The top X amount of teams from each league then got entered into a Champions League World Cup style tournament. It got refused by Activision. Then I was legally barred from hosting any tournament that uses the words Warzone League World. That sounds like a crazy situation. What position were you in where you could pitch that sort of stuff? Were you working for a company that was doing something like that, or were you just doing that as a random person? That seems like a crazy thing. CDL says CDL has ruined competitive COD. Doesn't allow any underdogs to take to the main stage. Yeah, the whole idea of having these teams with like big salaries and stuff like that, and lots of money behind it. I do get the idea, and like they were starting off to do the whole thing of massive in-person events and turning it into a real spectacle. But I think, like, at its heart, the flaw was, at least for me, I tried getting into it when they first announced the CDL. I tried really getting into it thinking, yeah, I can support London Royal Ravens, I could go down and watch some of their games and stuff like that. And then it was like, oh, I don't actually like watching competitive first-person shooters. I just don't think it's a fun experience. The perspective jumps around too much, the fights are over too quickly. It's just not a fun thing to watch. It's not like going to watch Dota or StarCraft or League of Legends, where even if you don't know the games very well, you can very clearly see what's going on. The commentators have time to explain the plays and stuff like that. It just doesn't really make sense. Should a lower skill gap will only push the higher percentage to get better? Yeah, I mean, like I've been saying this for a long while. It's just part of my whole being super at odds with a lot of the Call of Duty community. A lower skill gap is a good thing for an online game. Just like, I can't think of an exception. I can't think of a game where having a high... Well, actually, no. The only time I can think of it is when it's a super niche game where the only point of it is like the competition stuff. So like simulation racing or like, I don't know, chess or something like that, then fine, whatever. But if it's a game where you just want as many people to play as possible, then you want a low skill gap. Like, that just seems obvious to me. You don't want there to be a massive difference between the people that dedicate their lives to a video game and the people who are just trying it out for the first time. You want everyone to be able to have fun, and a lower skill gap is the way to do that. Like, 100%. Like, the only people I see who are arguing for the higher skill gap in whatever it is, movement, aiming, whatever, it always seems to come down to them thinking that being good at Call of Duty is an inherently good thing. That like their mindset is that everybody wants to be good at Call of Duty. And I just don't get that. Like, I just don't understand it. I find that a weird mindset to me. Like, it's a toy. It's a video game. It's something that should be fun. I want to be good at having fun in the game. You know, I want to be able to have fun. So that could be involve things like being aware of different aspects of the game, like how you can do different things in the game, like being aware of the different ways you can have a laugh in it and the way you can make things happen. But I think the idea of a game arbitrarily making the skill gap higher, so if you want to enjoy yourself, you've got to put practice in, you've got to put lots of effort in. I don't think that's right. And it's really interesting. Like, a lot of people, when they talk about this sort of thing, they use Dark Souls as an example, or Elden Ring. Those games aren't that hard. You don't have to put a lot of time practicing into Dark Souls or Elden Ring to get good enough to finish those games. You can play through those games in, what, 20 to 40 hours. You can play through those games and complete it. And basically anyone could. You don't need any prior experience or anything. They're not massively hard games. They're kind of punishing in terms of they don't explain a lot to you. They leave you to work out a lot and stuff like that. And the exploration is a fun thing. But they're also super forgiving. You know, they let you make lots and lots of mistakes and still win. They let you, you know, over-level bosses and things like that to give yourself a much bigger chance. If you want, you can go find some crazy item that lets you beat the bosses much easier. They have it so there's optional bosses that are much, much harder for the people that want that challenge, but the main bosses to finish the game actually aren't that bad. It's like, those games are a good example of a game that has a surprisingly low skill gap. Like, the skill most people enter Elden Ring with, up to the skill required to finish that game, it's pretty low. Like, it's a pretty small thing. It doesn't take a lot of effort to get good at, like, get good enough at that game. If you want to be, you know, speed running it naked, not getting a hit, then, you know, then it's a much higher skill gap. But no, not many people care about doing that. You know, they can watch the content creators do it, but they don't care about it. I just think skill gaps are a negative thing for basically every game. Mark Kidsey says Hazard Zone had potential. Yeah, I don't really know what was wrong with Hazard Zone in Battlefield. I remember playing it like twice and being like, yeah, I don't like it. Pal said you got to remember a lot of COD's fan base is literally 14. I don't think that's true, Pal. I think that's something that I used to believe, that all of the Call of Duty players are, you know, all the Call of Duty players were like 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds. When you're talking on voice comm, stuff like that, and you hear proxy chat, I don't often hear kids anymore. And when I was a teacher, because I was a secondary school teacher, so I taught a lot of like 13 to 18-year-olds, most of them didn't care about Call of Duty. Like, it was, they were much more interested in like GTA Online, Roblox, Minecraft, some of the like horror games and stuff like that, you know, Dead by Daylight and stuff like that were quite popular. But there wasn't that many of them that were super into Call of Duty. And on Fortnite, obviously. It wasn't like, that wasn't their main game. I think it used to be that Call of Duty was really popular with a lot of that kind of age group. But then we grew up, you know, like, all those people who were teenagers who were playing, you know, Black Ops 1 and 2 and that sort of era, they grew up. And then I think the newer generations, rather than getting into Call of Duty, got into Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft. And they've kind of grown up with those games now. You know, and I'm sure then like the next generation of kids will have something else that they're into. But yeah, I honestly, I'd be surprised if the average age of Call of Duty players, especially like Warzone players, I reckon the average age is probably somewhere in the 20s. That's my guess. That's a vaguely educated guess. That's somewhere in the 20s. Going on mostly, you know, like whenever I've interacted with people, they tend to sound like in 20s. I've always been surprised when you talk to people online, you know, talk to people on Twitter. Back when I used to get a lot more engaged in Twitter arguments and Reddit arguments with people about Call of Duty when I was an idiot. So then you'd look at their profile to see what else they're posting, and it's like, oh, they've got kids and a job. Like this is an adult, and you know, like they sound like kids and they interact like kids, but they definitely, like, a lot of them are adults. Like, a lot of them. Just yeah. Lots of people grew up. I think the children you hear probably stand out more to you, potentially, plus you're in the Oceania region, so everyone sounds the same. I don't know about that. I don't know about everyone sound the same. I've never really thought about that age, how much you can tell people's age in other accents and things like that. You've also got the thing that in your region, there's like a lot less people like playing the game. You've got a much lower server population, so if there are kids, you're much more likely to be playing against them, I guess. Right. I'm not going to shut this down early. We're going to talk about some of the other news because we've still got 4 news stories to go through. So this is just going to be a bumper edition of the podcast. Strap in. But we're going to go quite quickly. The next one. Ed Boon talked a little bit about Mortal Kombat 1 and it was just a vaguely interesting thing about this. I'm excited about Mortal Kombat 1. I'm excited to see some gameplay from it. I'm excited that I think I said in the podcast the other day it's coming in October. It's not. It's coming in September, which is really soon. That's only like 4 months away. And he said that Mortal Kombat is called Mortal Kombat 1 because it is very much the beginning of a universe. He said that like you don't need to have played Mortal Kombat 11. The like most of the storyline Mortal Kombat 11 doesn't matter. The only thing that really matters about it is that the universe got rebooted with Liu Kang as God, basically. And so now all of the characters are kind of, they don't remember their past. They don't remember what's going on. They're kind of new versions of them. They have new relationships with each other, new kind of allegiances and stuff like that. And he was saying, like, it's, you know, with the previous generation of Mortal Kombat, going from Mortal Kombat 1 or Mortal Kombat all the way up to Mortal Kombat 11, that it was, you know, Sub-Zero and Scorpion were like the two main kind of the iconic characters that would be on the covers and stuff like that. Now Liu Kang is like, now he's like the new cover art person. So yeah, I think that's interesting. It's kind of interesting they've kept the characters, but they're going to do like new takes on them. I think that'll be interesting. Like, I wonder if it'll be as simple as like Melina will be the good one and Katana will be the bad one, like that kind of thing. You know, Kano will be good, but Sonya Blade will be bad. Whether it'll be as simple as like them just reversing people's roles, or whether there'll be some more nuance to it. I have actually genuinely enjoyed the Mortal Kombat story modes for the last few games. I think they've been really good fun. Right, the next news story, Spider-Man 2. We got a little bit of news about Spider-Man 2. This is because there was some things came out. One of the voice actors from Spider-Man 2 was going around being like, someone was like, is the new game co-op? And he was like, I don't know if they've announced it, but I think so, yeah. And then, like, that prompted the people who are making Spider-Man 2 to come out and be like, no, it isn't. It's a single-player game. And they're like, it's the best single-player game we could possibly make. But it's interesting to see them come out and just address a kind of leak or rumor like that and just be like, no, don't get your hopes up for co-op. I think because a lot of the art and stuff, like, the little things we know about Spider-Man 2 have been like, oh, it's Spider-Man and Miles Morales. Well, Peter Parker and Miles Morales. And so people kind of assumed it might be two-player, but it looks like it will not be. I'm sure we'll see more of that game next Wednesday. No, this Wednesday. Not even next Wednesday. This Wednesday. It's tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll see more of this game, so then, like, none of this will matter. But I'm excited about it. I'm excited about seeing more, so that's going to be cool. There is, by the way, this PlayStation thing happening tomorrow, the PlayStation Showcase. I'm not going to be live streaming it, because I've got to have a tiny bit of surgery tomorrow on the very end of my tongue, so I imagine talking will be quite uncomfortable for me. Also means there might not be a podcast on Thursday, depending on how I feel. I don't really know how messed up I'm going to be after this. But talking will be difficult, so less content this week, maybe. Then, the next news story, Summer Games Fest. Jeff Keighley's been bigging it up, sort of, talking about this. This is happening on June 8th, I think. And he said Summer Games Fest has 3 or 4 pretty big things, in his words. He's been saying that, you know, it's not like the Game Awards. It's not going to be announcement. It's going to be much more, you know, him getting a chance to sit down and talk to developers and stuff. Sounds like it's going to be much more of a low-key thing. It was interesting. He said he thinks it's going to have 3 or 4 things that the audience for that will see as pretty big. When he says that, he was even going on to say, oh, you know, it's annoying running these kind of shows is difficult because sometimes you think you're going to have things and you don't, or people sign up, but then the game's not ready or whatever. So it sounds like maybe he thought he would have more than he actually does. So yeah, I'm not holding out a lot of hope for that Summer Games Fest show. When he says 3 or 4 pretty big things, it's like you can assume one of them is Death Stranding 2, that there'll be some like new trailer or some gameplay for that or something. And then it's like, okay, what will the other 2 or 3 things be? So yeah, my expectations for Summer Games Fest, that specific show, are definitely tempered a little bit, I think. Lots of ice cream, Mark Izzy, off my tongue. Yeah. Ice cream and soup, I think, is going to be the way forward for the next few days. Then we've got 2 more news stories. Final Fantasy XVI previews are out. You can read them everywhere. They sound pretty positive. Lots of people doing this weird thing of, I've seen it in a bunch of previews. I was reading a few of them this morning. And loads of them are doing this whole thing of like, it's a really good game, but is it Final Fantasy? Like, you know, it's a real worry for like, what is the core of Final Fantasy? Like, are we losing that? It's like, who cares? They're making Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy's always been weird. Like, you know, Final Fantasy 1 to 6 are kind of similar to each other. And then 7 was super different. And then 8 was really different from 7. 9 was different from 8. Every game since then has felt, I would say, dramatically different from the one before it. If you just look at, like, the main series, you don't look at all the spin-offs. It's like, they have been dramatically different, and like, that's part of the joy of Final Fantasy, is that, you know, now we're getting Final Fantasy 16 that's going to be about, you know, giant kaiju summons and monsters and stuff, but Final Fantasy 17 could be, you know, an MMO, it could be a bloody racing game, I don't know, could be something completely different. I really hate that sentiment of like, this isn't Final Fantasy, as if like the critics or the players can tell the developers like, oh, you think you're making a Final Fantasy game, but you're not. This isn't Final Fantasy. You know, when people say like, oh, this isn't Star Wars when they're talking about The Last Jedi, or they're like, you know, oh, this isn't Call of Duty. You know, Warzone is this. Warzone has to have loadouts and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. I hate that. I hate that kind of thing of the idea of the audience telling the creators what their project is. I don't like that at all. Not a fan. And then finally, the last news story, just a quick update to the Microsoft Activision acquisition. It's quite a tongue twister. Is that it has been cleared in China. I didn't even know if there was a problem with China. I've got no idea what happens with things like that in China. But it does mean that now it's, you know, China said it's okay. Europe said it's okay. The US seems like they'll probably say it's okay when it goes to the courts. It's going to make the UK look very, very silly. I think this is just going to go through. I think there'll be a quiet thing where I think if the US courts agree to the acquisition and say like, yeah, it's fine, and the FDA can't block it, or the FTC or whoever it is can't block it, then I think like it'll just be a quiet thing that I don't think it'll even take the 9 months of the CMA's like whole process. I think they'll quietly just be like, oh yes, well, we've seen what Microsoft have done in the streaming space recently, and we've changed our mind. Because Microsoft have been making loads of announcements over the last week of there's all of these different streaming services that I've never heard of, saying like, hey, we've signed a partnership with Microsoft, so all of Microsoft games are going to be on here. They've been doing loads and loads of that, so they obviously see that as kind of a strategy to getting this all done. Right, that was a quick run through the news. I hope people enjoyed that, and a big old rant about Call of Duty and competitive gaming. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you're new here. I'm going to be heading over to Twitch and having another go at playing some Warzone Ranked. So if you want to come follow me over there, I'll put the link in chat. But it's twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes. Just look for Geeky Pastimes on Twitch and you'll find me. I'll be live over there in like 10 minutes probably. So hope to see a bunch of you there. Thank you very much to everyone that has watched, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye. Boop.